Hello and welcome to Steampunk Abyss, devlog number 15. For those of you returning, you'll notice the sound quality is noticeably better. I got a new mic and I got some new equipment coming soon, so hopefully that's in next video. So today we're going to be finishing up this list here. This is 7 ways to design your game. Last week we talked about the first 4, and this week we're going to finish it up with these last 3. These last 3 are pretty interesting, I think. Now, they're less generally applicable in general than the ones I talked about in the first video, but they're still very valid and should be considered more often, to be honest. So the first one we're going to talk about today is technical. Now, this one is generally more used than the rest in this video, for sure. You definitely should be thinking about the technical aspect of your game at some point. However, when you take this as your main form of design, it can be very interesting. It has been done. It's not that common. It's most common when something new comes out, some new form of input or way to interact. VR or the Kinect, for example, spawned tons of games, some of which were brilliant because of these new tools that these developers were experimenting with on a technical level. Technical design can be a bit more interesting. It can be expensive, first of all, because you need a lot more technical work to go into it, as in the name implies. So you're going to need to put either more time of your own time, which counts as an expense, or you're going to have to hire somebody for more money that has higher skill tiers than other people. Now, a lot of times these games will also take the form of doing something that everyone has wanted to do but can't because it's very difficult. You know, putting hundreds of players on one map, or, basically you're pushing the limits of what we've already done a lot of times to build on later. A lot of times these do have a game attached to them, but that game can be very hit or miss on the gameplay quality, because a lot of times it's more focused on this technical thing. But then later, if you have that support still because of this technical achievement, you can build on that to build some pretty impressive mechanics and games that no one else could at the time, or that nobody else has. Not necessarily couldn't, but hasn't. So technical design has its pros and cons, of course. In its pros, I'd say it's easy to show off something impressive. It's easy to gain a following, especially in the game dev communities, which can lead to a following of press, which leads to a following of fans. So it can be a very good way to build a community. Now, I'd say that it gives you a good base for your next game, because now you have something to build on with some other forms of design, and the technical part is already out of the way, so you can invest a lot more time in narrative or gameplay or that kind of thing, so that your next game will be massively better with this new tech that you've developed. Another pro is you'll have an opportunity, if you do this well, to advanced game design in general, to advanced technology for games in general. You may get opportunities to share, through Gamasutra or through GDC or some of those other resources, and you'll have devs that will look to you, which will make it a lot easier to attract employees or freelancers to work with you. It'll be a lot easier to have that reputation because of this. You can be seen as an expert in the field. Now, of course, there is its cons. Its main con is it can often make a game suffer. If it has a technical focus, it can have a hard time connecting with people, because a lot of times the story or the gameplay feels kind of slapped onto the technology. This isn't always the case. If you have enough time and resources, that usually doesn't happen. However, that's the other con, is it can take a lot of time and a lot of resources. It can be very expensive to design from this point, whether it be expensive time-wise or expensive with actual funds. That depends on how you're doing this, but it can be a studio killer if you don't have a plan beyond that. So if you don't have the funds to continue after that game without anything from that game or the time, then this isn't a great choice. However, if you do, this is an amazing direction, because you can have huge advantages in the future, even if this first one doesn't do well. The next is gamification. This one's interesting because it's more utilitarian almost than the other ones, even monetary, because gamification is when you take a normal everyday task or job and you try to add games to make it either more appealing or maybe to help people learn better, that kind of thing. It's very interesting as a field. Now, this is actually a growing market as well. So if you're looking to make money, this can be a very, very solid choice. So some of the places this is being applied is actually very interesting. For example, the gamification of education is happening in some places for research, and it seems to be doing well for certain. It's hit and miss. The research is kind of interesting. It seems to be, it depends on the person a lot, especially. And I think a big problem is a lot of times I've looked at those studies and the game that they use/made is usually pretty bad and suffers a lot from the design because of what they're trying to do. It's kind of a new field, so there's not a lot of established practices. So I think a lot of the nebulous numbers comes from the fact that the game design is so poor. There's some places where it's definitely showing a lot more promise. Athlete training, doctors using simulators, having way higher success rates. The military actually has been doing this for a long time. In fact, they've even used it as a recruitment method. Some other examples, I actually know a dude that's doing this for a in-company app that they're planning on eventually marketing to other companies, actually. Basically, it gamifies work almost. That adds events that if you report to, you can get points. It allows managers to send prizes of various tiers, including some pretty cool stuff depending on what they add, so they can thank, their employees. This is more for, some jobs that are more office type jobs where a lot of work may not get recognized. So it gamifies recognition of employees. It's actually a very interesting concept because it can help people a ton and help people do things that they should be doing but have a hard time maintaining, or maybe they have a hard time figuring out how to do. This kind of thing is actually very useful, and it's growing, and it's a very cool kind of section of game design that you might want to look into. So some of the pros I would say for this is there's sometimes almost a lack of people doing this, so it can be a lot easier to prove yourself here. It can be a lot easier to differentiate yourself. Another pro I would say is you end up helping people, which is great. In my opinion, that's a massive pro. In fact, it's a big reason I think game design is attractive to me, is because even though there's a lot of debate on the subject, in my opinion, game design helps people, and I think it will help people even more if we lean into that. Now, some of the cons are more social. A lot of people react poorly to gamification that aren't gamers. Outside of that, they don't understand why this works. They don't understand that people are motivated in games a lot of the ways they are also motivated in life. They don't understand a lot of the actual physical benefits that games can have, the mental benefits games can have, that kind of thing. So the last one is research or academic application. This one's very interesting, actually. So this ranges from experimental games that are trying to push the limits of what game design can do or come up with something new, to more actual physical research levels where they're studying germs and their structures, diseases and such, by unwrapping their models in Unity. There's actually some cool GDC talks on this. I suggest you go look them up. I'll see if I can find them and drop a link in the description. So this actually covers a variety of areas. Every few years this gets politically recycled. Video games cause violence, video games don't cause violence. Games are to blame, games are not to blame, and everyone ends up fighting. Good thing about this, though, is it does push funding money into studies about games, which we as designers should be paying attention to. We should be looking to see if we're causing harm, where we're causing harm, and ways to mitigate that harm. And on the opposite side, how we can help more, what good things we can do for the world. So far as I can see, the research has been very positive, or at least neutral. There are some things about maybe gaming compulsion that we should be watching, because there is some there is some data there that kind of shows that there might be something we need to design differently, ethically. So we should be paying attention to current research as much as possible. So we should be, as designers, paying attention to this research so we can design ethically. Now, if I'm wrong about, if you know some negative studies or something, feel free to send them my way. I'm always down to read some research and some peer-reviewed studies and such to kind of, expand my knowledge, especially when it comes to game design. But there's a lot of positive physical research too, not just on games themselves, but games helping research other things. It's been used to unwrap models of germs. At University of Utah, there's a yearly contest where they invite game design students to invent or design a game or some inputs to help sick people, and that's produced a lot of cool things, from using the Wii for physical therapy, all the way up to helping sick children positively visualize beating their disease, and the help that can bring, the strength that can bring. So some of the pros are, you get to help humanity even more so than with the gamification. You get to help advance human knowledge, which is one of the most important things that we do in our modern society. Another pro is you get to have a practical impact on someone's life, which is interesting. That's one of the things that drew me to game design, was some of the games I've played have influenced me massively. And so being able to help figure out why and how to make that happen is awesome. It's a hugely important pursuit. So some of the cons for this approach, I'd say, is you're going to need a college degree, which, depending on where you live, can be very expensive, especially here in the US. That's a huge problem. It can be very expensive. And since most of game design, honestly, you don't need a college degree, to break into the AAA industry, it can be helpful, but even there, you don't necessarily need it. There's plenty of places that will hire you if you're good enough, if you know what you're doing, and most of that can be learned off of YouTube. So you basically need to make that investment, that expense, if you want to break into this side of game design, which can be hugely limiting. Another con is, depending on where you live, there's a lot less funding going into this than there should be. So depending on where you live, you may have to be massively more academically competitive than other places to get the funding you need to make this research happen. Now, for this approach, like I said, you don't necessarily have to go an academic route. You can go the experimental route. So there's always that. However, in general, that's kind of what I'm going for this approach. If you want to help advance game design specifically, that's less of a problem, honestly, because game designers are always looking to better themselves, or at least a good designer is. So, you can build up a following of game designers on Gama Sutra. You can give talks at GDC. Those kind of things are also another method of approaching this, so that you're more talking academically to designers or programmers or artists rather than general academics. So depending on what route you take, but either way, it's going to be a very, very competitive area. There's plenty of people that want to do this, and you're going to have to work hard either way, which isn't really a pro or con. It's just a thing you need to know if you're going this route. I want to end by saying that we as designers need to have these conversations. I said this in the last video, and I'm going to say it again. If you want to have a conversation about this, drop by my Discord or leave a comment. If there's something you think I missed, or an approach that you want to hear more about, or an approach that I didn't cover, I'm sure they exist. These are just the ones I could think of and that I could discuss with other people. So let me know if there's anything, and I'll try my best to cover it or discuss it with you. So look forward to the build this Wednesday. It's a pretty big one. There's a lot more stuff that you can actually use than in the last one. So look forward to that. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.